All right, so we are in for a bit of good news, a reprieve on the fuel price come midnight this evening. Petrol is going down by, give or take, R1.30 a litre, diesel dropping by in the region of 90 cents a litre. It's just as well as the fuel tax reprieve of the past few months has now come to an end. The general fuel levy, you'll remember, was trimmed around April to help keep rising fuel prices under control. The Departments of Energy and Treasury were in April tasked with permanent solutions, coming up with good, solid, permanent plans to keep our fuel prices lean. Let's get an update now. I'm joined by Tseliso Maqubela, Deputy Director General for Mineral and Petroleum Regulation at the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Let's start with the general fuel levy. That is at around R3.98 per litre. Every litre that we pay for contains that chunk that goes to the general fuel levy. My understanding is that that contributes about 90 billion rand to the fiscus. So that money is taken out of the fuel price and put into the big pot to actually run our country. That's the fuel the levy that was chopped down for a period to give us a bit of a reprieve. That's now come to an end. Are you looking seriously at some sort of permanent cut in that general fuel levy?
Well, good evening, Sally and the viewers of eNCA. At the moment, the cut on the fuel levy is not on the cards. I think we need to realize as a country that we've been affected by geopolitics. And the evidence of that is the fact that now that there's been some level of stability, I think the market understands what's happening globally. Supply chains are improving. The prices are beginning to come down. In fact, we can already see that September is also looking quite good. I know that I'm saying this knowing fully well what's happening in China, and Taiwan as we speak. But if there's no other geopolitical crisis, I think that we're in for a good run going into September. So that is quite exciting for us. But of course, Sally, as you know, we are not just looking at that. The ministers tasked us to look at other ways of making sure that our prices, improve going forward. So the demand side management levy of 10 cents that was charged to inland customers was removed permanently.
Okay.
And then we are now looking at, the minister published a regulation asking for people to comment on unleaded 93.
And that's the deregulation issue, which I want to get to. Okay, so that 10 cents extra that we were paying in inland provinces for the sort of transportation, you've stripped that out already. So that's already a permanent change for those of us inland. R2.18 of every litre of fuel that we pay for, round about that, goes to the road accident fund. What are you considering there? Because the road accident fund has really got into serious trouble in terms of corruption and mismanagement and a waste of money. Are you still considering whether to trim that road accident fund levy? Because my understanding is that R2.18 goes completely to the road accident fund.
Okay, Sally, I think that is a difficult question, I must admit, because there is a convention in government, and that is that you don't talk about levies without the Minister of Finance or National Treasury giving you that mandate. So I would really request that I don't get into that terrain because we'd like to keep those conventions. I think that is a matter that the legislature would have to look at and see whether some of these are still fulfilling the purpose. Yeah. But I really think that we must understand that the fuel levy is critical for the fiscus, and we're doing what other countries that we trade with are doing.
Let me just understand why you can't talk about the possibility of trimming the road accident fund, because you were quite clear that trimming the general fuel levy is definitely not on the cards. And my understanding is that the Department of Minerals and Energy, where you are, plus people from Treasury, have been meeting to talk about exactly things like the road accident fund levy and what you should do about it.
Well, what we've been meeting about is looking at the basic fuel price calculation, as well as the regulatory account system calculation. So we are looking at those. There are announcements that will be made at the right time. So, for example, we have consulted industry about removing a surcharge, some insurance that we believe is no longer required. But I mean, it will give us very little, 2 or 3 cents. But we think that 2 or 3 cents is better than actually doing nothing. So we're engaged with our colleagues to look continuously at what we can do. But really, I think the biggest issue is geopolitics. So for us, what is going on today between the visit of the Speaker of the U.S. And the response of China, I think it depends how that is managed.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's out of our hands. That is out of our hands. Yes. But my understanding is that Treasury and the Department of Energy have been meeting since March to look at where we can control the price of fuel. So the margins is another area, the bit that the wholesalers add on. Are those still under discussion?
Everything is under discussion. And we said we will do things that are not going to disrupt the market, because at the same time, we know that in the last 4 or 5 months, the oil marketing companies have been bringing fuel to the country at a loss. And that is reflected in the slate levy. So they've been losing money. But because the rules are rules, they have to supply at the price that is set. So at some point, they also need to recover, what they've been losing. Yeah.
All right. So before we move on to regulation, let me just recap what you've told me, that 10 cents extra we were paying inland, the demand side management, that's already been stripped out. Absolutely not on the cards to take anything from the general fuel levy, which is R3.98 a litre, bearing in mind that the initial cushion on that levy for the last few months was because of the sale of oil reserves. So we cannot mess with that anymore, because that needs to go into the fiscus. The road accident fund money, you can't say. So I'm saying that's maybe a maybe, and we might hear about that at a later stage. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Margins are a tricky one because importers have been bringing fuel into the country at a loss at this point. So where does that leave us? Does that leave us with the possibility of deregulation around 93? Because we've seen some sort of deregulation around diesel. You can now shop around a bit for diesel. I think there's a cap, and you can go below that in offering diesel to your customers. What's the plan around 93 octane petrol?
Okay, firstly, I think the cap on 93, we don't see it as deregulation as such, because there is still a cap. On diesel, there is no cap. Effectively, the oil companies, oil marketing companies can charge anything, but they use what is published as a reference point. Now, with what has been proposed now by the minister is that for 93, let us have a cap to test also what happens in the market, because not many people use 93 fuel. So if you try this with the 95, you are likely to disrupt the market. So we felt that there's not, because less than 20% of the vehicle owners use 93, then let's see what happens to the market when there's a cap. So the cap will still be at where, the PFP price is today. Mm-hmm. Below that, we feel they can then sell, and then let's see if they are able to pass the benefits to the motorists. Now, the unfortunate part is that, there's only one refiner that can produce that 93 in the country. And in fact, it's the two companies, Sasol and Total, because the others currently are importing fuel. And I think that is something that we have to take into consideration. It could have worked 3-4 years ago when all the refineries were still operational.
Yeah, the refinery problem is a big one indeed. I want to ask you, you mentioned that in terms of looking at some of the levies, particularly around the Road Accident Fund levy and possibly other cuts, could happen at the right time. Can you give me an idea of when we're likely to see more cuts announced? Is it definitely still on the cards, or was that 10 cents for those of us inland it?
Well, the 10 cents was what was agreed between the two ministers. And effectively, I can say that for the moment, that was it. We know that, there is going to be an opportunity for the Minister of Finance to, during the medium-term budget policy statement, perhaps. I don't know. This is something, as I said, we generally do not veer towards in government.
All right. Thank you very much for chatting to us. I do appreciate it. That is Tseliso Maqubela, Deputy Director General for Mineral and Petroleum Regulation in the Department of Energy. And really what he's told us is no further cuts coming in terms of trying to trim the price or trim some of the levies. However, the Minister of Finance, it seems from what he's saying, is that Road Accident Fund portion of the petrol price, every litre we pay around R2.18. That might still be under consideration. He didn't want to speak out of turn, but we might see something in the medium-term policy budget, which I think is coming in October. But he did say September's looking good in terms of geopolitics and the price of oil coming down. So we're going to hold on to that.